Are people really self-made? What about rags to riches stories? Do people really pick themselves up from the dust and create an environment that makes them successful all by themselves? Are there antecedents to success? Let's dig in. The book, Outliers. The author, Malcolm Gladwell. And you're listening to Lit Society. Let's get lit! Hi, readers. This is Alexis.
And this is Kari.
And you're listening to Lit Society, a podcast about books and drama. So, Kari, how was your week?
You know, it's been really busy. I'm exhausted. What about you?
Wow. Last week, I developed hives from an unknown source. It's essentially my allergies getting worse.
Do you think it was my cat?
No. Wednesday night, I couldn't sleep. I was waking up every hour and a half because of itching.
No. Mm-hmm.
Thursday morning, my face was swole. And then Thursday evening, I couldn't sleep. I finally went into the urgent care.
What?
And,
you be out here living a whole life and not telling nobody. What happened?
And I got 2 butt injections to get the swelling
That's
to go
unrelated.
down.
In Miami. Now, I remember when you got them. Is this about hives?
This is about hives. And I'm just starting to really feel better today. I went back for a follow-up appointment on this morning. And I had a little rash, but it wasn't itchy on my breast and kind of like I must have been scratching in my sleep, but it is. I'm heavily medicated with allergy medicine and prednisone, so it's only supposed to get better from here, but we shall see. So I've been sleeping a lot and not working because I've been so miserable
and medicated. Everybody know allergy medicine just puts you to sleep. That's all it is sleeping pills.
Yeah, so I've just been very ugh.
Miserable.
But I'm better now. Yep, I'm better now.
Well, I'm glad you're on the other side of that and you have no idea what led to it.
No, I don't. It really just could be that my allergies are getting worse.
You don't think it's anxiety? Going back to the office?
No.
Oh, okay. Just throwing that out there with my limited medical knowledge.
Well, stress is one of the things that can cause hives, but no, that's not it.
Okay.
I'm not stressed out about anything. I'm back at work. I've been there for a few weeks now. And as you can see, I work by myself in a little bitty corner.
You have no reason to complain. It ain't a little corner, but we going to play your game. Yes, you have a beautiful office basically to yourself, a whole floor.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
So yeah, but I'm better today. Anyway, let's move along with our good fun times.
Okay.
Each week we select a theme to discuss.
Folks will really be in the emergency room, and I tell you, okay, yes, theme of the week, the podcast.
I wasn't in emergency. I went to urgent care. That's different.
I don't know the difference.
It's very different. It's like going into a doctor's office.
Why would you do that unless it was an emergency?
Because my doctor said I needed to be treated.
Okay, girl. We'll talk about it offline. Go ahead.
Each week, readers, we select a theme to discuss inspired by the book we are reading. This week's theme is the 10,000 hour rule a misinterpretation of research? Kari, in the first few chapters of Outliers and a little bit throughout, Gladwell speaks of the 10,000 hour rule. He didn't originate the rule, but he definitely popularized it with the release of his book in 2008.
Without a doubt, yeah.
The 10,000 hour rule originated with a study done in the early 1990s by psychologist Kay Anders Ericsson and 2 colleagues at Berlin's Elite Academy of Music. The idea is that 10,000 hours of practice is required to achieve the level of mastery associated with being a world-class expert in anything. It doesn't matter the field or area of expertise. You could be a composer, a basketball player, a fiction writer, an ice skater, even a master criminal. This is even true of people considered prodigies. Prodigies? Prodigies.
Mm-hmm.
However,
protege. I do not know.
If you're a protege, that means you come up behind somebody, right? But a prodigy.
A protege is just a young genius in some type of category.
But then what is a prodigy? Is it the same thing?
Prodigy is a rapper. Hold on.
That's a stage name.
It's only prodigy I know. Hold on.
Okay.
How to pronounce prodigy? Well, what's protege? Oh, girl, they spell differently.
Ooh.
Wait, what is... Am I dumb? Prodigy. Oh, prodigy versus prodigy. Here we go. We ain't the only ones.
I love when they have it right there for you.
Me too. Okay,
what's the answer?
The noun prodigy refers to a highly talented young person or a wondrous event. The noun protege refers to someone whose training or career is advanced by an influential person.
So, yes. However, Erickson believes that Gladwell oversimplified and incorrectly interpreted his research. Erickson says that 10,000 is an arbitrary number and is not based on anything substantial. Erickson says Gladwell misunderstood that the 10,000 hours was an average. The 10,000 hour rule also doesn't take into consideration the type of practice. Instead, it seems to focus on the quantity and not the quality of practice. Not all practice is equally helpful. Erickson says the best way to get better at something is through deliberate practice, meaning practicing in order to get better, doing activities recommended by experts to develop specific abilities, identifying weaknesses, and working to correct them, and intentionally pushing yourself out of your comfort zone. Erickson says you don't get better from mechanical repetition, but by adjusting your execution over and over to get closer to your goal. But even that's not enough. The factors of greatness not only include deliberate practice, but also your genetic makeup, when you start, how you learn. All that combined determines how long it will take you to reach mastery. So, how can we use this 10,000 hour rule for our everyday lives? Well, I found an article that said it's called Develop Good Habits, 11 Ways to Master Any Skill. And we'll just go into them.
This is
How about that?
Yeah, I love it.
So the first one, and Carl, you're really good at giving examples when I speak to things. So I am going to look for you to provide examples, okay?
Oh, the pressure.
As I talk about some of these skills, these 11 ways. Okay. The first one is identify what you want to be able to accomplish. Be selective in what the skill is going to be. The perfect skill for you to master either solves a problem that you have or is directly related to something that you're interested in. Otherwise, you lose motivation and the perseverance that you need to be successful. You want to be excited about reaching your end goal. Okay? So first, identify what's something that you want to accomplish. So when you identify something that you want to accomplish, you want to set very specific goals that require you to have a clear path. Vague goals are not very motivating because they lack inspiring details. So an example in that case might be what, Kari?
So let's say, for example, you are trying to learn a new language. You are not going to be able to, after studying that language for 2 months, watch an entire movie and understand what they're saying. However, you can try to hold a rudimentary, like a real basic conversation with a child. And I think speaking to children is great practice because their grammar is terrible. They usually only know how to convey thoughts in the way that people speak to them. And that is usually kind of sloppy grammatically. So that's great. Practice conversation perhaps with a child or try to learn a certain number of words within a time frame that you can use in everyday life.
So instead of saying something like, I want to learn French in 2 months, be very specific about your goal. I want to know, maybe I want to be able to have a conversation with a child in 2 months. That's very specific and goal directed. And that'll help you.
I want to know this song this French song. I want to be able to sing it. And I'm
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So pick something that will help solve a problem for you or something that you have a deep interest in. The second thing is to accept your current experience level. Admitting that you are a complete beginner at a skill you wish to master is important. Everyone interprets mastering something differently.
You're saying set the end goal. What is the end goal after all these milestones are accomplished?
Yeah, make it clear and make it realistic. Okay. Make it realistic. If you set a reasonable goal with your experience level in mind and you're able to stick with it, it'll be more reasonable to hit your milestone and achieve your goal. 3, determine how you learn best. Some people learn hands-on. Some people prefer to watch others and watch others demonstrate it to them and then you follow. Other people like to learn by just reading. Well, you need to determine what your best learning style is so you can be most effective at achieving your goal. Knowing your learning style and using methods suitable to your style can help you absorb the information and execute the skill faster. Number 4, see if you can break down a skill into sub-skills. I've heard this called chunking the elephant. It's got other names as well. It's when you have a big goal and you break it down into manageable parts. It helps you feel at ease with learning this new skill. Okay. So you identify the most basic building blocks of the skill that you start with. If we go back to learning a language, instead of saying learn French, which is very vague and encompasses so much, you want to be able to master the first level of French program within 3 weeks, maybe learning the basic, just common use words. 5, focus on learning the most important sub-skills. Again, back to chunking that elephant. You want to identify the goal segments and establish which ones are truly necessary for success and pay attention to those first. And then use that deliberate practice. That's one of the things that Erickson said that Gladwell was leaving out. He said you have to be able to have deliberate practice that enhances you, that identifies your weaknesses so you can work on those. And then when you have success, celebrate your success. Take pride in your progress and then recognize that achievement of mastering each sub-skill so that you can maintain that long-term motivation. Number 6, while practicing, focus on the quality of your work rather than the quantity or duration of your practice. So this is all based off of that 10,000 hours. Well, instead of focusing on that number, think about that 80-20 rule. Kari, are you familiar with the 80-20 rule?
Please remind me.
We know that 80% of what we're learning will come from 20% of the work that we do. So identify the 20% of work that will give you the most results when you are learning something new.
Yes, again, I've heard this regarding vacuuming.
Oh, okay. How does that work?
Analogy. Yeah. What is it? Okay. So let's say you're at home and your kids have thrown all the toys all over the floor. With this 80-20 rule, what you do first is not vacuum every crevice of the floor. You pick up the large things that are laying around. So like the toys and stuff. That won't take you as long and that will make the room look relatively clean already. Straighten up, but don't straighten. Okay, if you need to straighten up but don't have the time to put things away and get things really clean, get everything that doesn't belong on the floor off the floor. And then number 2, clean surfaces. Number 3, make the bed. And 4, straighten items. 5th, vacuum. That takes the most effort because you're getting every corner, but already the room looks clean. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's where I've heard the rule from.
It does, and it I don't know what it makes me think of, but I've kind of heard that before. But it just in the idea of the way you clean is just picking up the big pieces and putting them away first. That can have a huge impact on, especially how you feel about your results early on.
Yeah, because your feelings affect your motivation.
Yes. So good. That was number 6. While practicing, focus on the quality of your work rather than the quantity or the duration of your practice. 7, Find a mentor, coach, or teacher who can give you feedback about how you are doing. Having a mentor can give you some leadership or high quality advice from someone who already has been in your shoes. For instance, you could get a trainer if you're trying to lose weight, or you can get a buddy who's further along than you are. And you can ask them about the roadblocks they face when learning a skill. And you can have a tutor when you're learning a new language. 8, share what you know with others. This is like so wonderful because it's so true. When you teach others, it's one of the best ways for you to learn. So if you're able to understand a concept or idea well enough to relay it to others, it will help you internalize that information. And this teaching doesn't have to be like a formal setting. It could be informal. A friend who's also interested in gaining a skill, or start working with them just to get them started. And doing this will help you strengthen your own ability to learn and improve your skills with different people in different areas. Number 9, practice during the time of day when you feel most productive. It helps you focus more. So low points of productivity during the day, and trying to power through these times can lead to substandard results, but we want great results. So we have to find the best time that we are most productive, and that will allow us to produce the level of focus and energy that we need to be most productive while we're learning this new skill.
I tried to touch on that in our Anna Karenina, I think part 2, with the power of the middle.
Oh, yeah. I remember that.
So check out that episode if you forgot.
And another point, you may be tempted to dedicate. I mean, when you get excited about something that you're learning, you may be tempted to dedicate every waking hour to your newfound passion. This can lead to burnout. So try to avoid that, or spending all your energy to this one activity.
Or reading a book every week for a podcast. It's intense.
Yeah, it is. Number 10, be patient with yourself. Take baby steps when learning a new skill. Learn to pick yourself up every time you fall until you eventually get the hang of it. Be patient and don't have unrealistic expectations. Check in with someone who's already mastered the skill. See how long it's taking them and what kind of frustrations they've run into, and how they encounter tests of patience. And then finally, set manageable goals for every day. It's a good idea to take small steps first. Take incremental steps to make gradual progress toward your goal of learning a new skill. Little consistent steps that will create a greater change in the long run. Setting manageable goals will help you persist through the days when you really feel like quitting. So that's it. Although the 10,000 hour rule is not perfect, it does apply in a lot of ways. As we hear it in the story, it's the work. To me, it amounts to the amount of work that people are putting in.
Yeah, I feel like naysayers are taking it a little too literal.
Yeah.
It's the principle that he's presenting and expounding on that is really worth its weight.
I 100% agree. I think people are like, nah, you're doing too much. He really is.
I was an expert in 900 hours.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the principle there that he's speaking to is reasonable. And this is this man's original research. So, okay, somebody else is using it and making it popular. Don't be mad. Don't be mad.
That's right. Gladwell didn't think of this.
No.
And he says it once and twice, but he don't really repeat that he didn't create it, but that's okay.
But it's all very clear. You can find it in appendix. The author's name is in the book. So it's he's not making it his own. He really is just applying the principle.
Idea to real life.
Yeah. And just it, I think it essentially equates to like 10 years of work, apprentice work for at least 10 years. So
yeah,
that's it.
And you got me remembering ways I thought I would apply the 80-20 rule in life. When I first discovered this rule, I was like, oh my goodness, this has changed me. I have so much more time. 80-20. Instead of doing your whole face in the morning, do the mascara with the bright lip. That's 20% of the work for 80% of the output. If you got a business like we do, focus on the 20% that produces the most profit. Well, our business isn't profitable, but you know what I'm saying. So I love that. I liked all those ideas, and having a mentor who's been there before will help you feel like these walls that you're hitting, other people have hit them also. So yeah, I love that. Mm-hmm.
Great. So let's take a quick break before we jump into the author and context.
Okay, sounds good.
And we're back. Kari, can you give us some context and background about our author, Malcolm Gladwell?
Of course I can, Alexis. And before we start, I just want to say that Outliers was my introduction to Malcolm Gladwell, and I was all in. I carried that book everywhere with me until it was stolen by a dear friend named Alexis Honoria. Till this day, she has decided she did not steal it. And so it was a hardcover. I like hardcovers for some reason. I think she stole it. Do you have a hardcover of Outliers?
From the library, ma'am.
You can't even find the hardcover no more at the library, which is how I know she stole it from me. But that's okay. We gonna let the bygones be bygones.
This is my library book.
And that's fine. So what was your question, thief? So who is
Author
Malcolm Gladwell?
Context, please.
No problem. Malcolm Timothy Gladwell is a social anthropologist, journalist, author, instructor, podcaster, and public speaker. He do it all. He was born in Hampshire, England, September 3rd, 1963. And when he was 6, his family moved to a Mennonite community in Ontario, Canada. His mother's Jamaican psychotherapist, and his father was a mathematician, an English mathematician. He earned a bachelor's in history, and I love this. First of all, anybody with a bachelor's in history, at least 10 people have told you to stop earning your bachelor's in history. Stop doing it. Why are you doing it? What is going on?
What's the point?
Pick a real major. Are you going to be a teacher? How are you going to pay back your loans? No. History is awesome if you can just study it, right? Mm-hmm. And not have to worry about occupation from a degree. But anyway, he earned a bachelor's in history, and I have a feeling that he chose history just because he enjoyed it. He wasn't that great at school, not good enough anyway to go to grad school. And he was like, great, because I don't even like it here. Mm-hmm. And so he started working as a journalist for like a conservative publication before joining the team at the Washington Post. Guess how long, Alexis, he was with the Washington Post?
2 years.
10 years. 10,000 hours.
10,000 hours. That makes sense.
And he says he started as a basket case and ended as an expert after those 10,000 hours with the Washington Post. After the Post, he started at The New Yorker, where last week's subject, or in our episode from last week, Joseph Mitchell also, of course, worked and made famous. Gladwell's first assignment was to write about fashion. They looked at him and was like, write about fashion. He was like, okay. Please Google Malcolm Gladwell. This is funny. He says it was much more interesting to write a piece about someone who made T-shirts for $8 than it was to write about a dress that costs $100,000. I mean, you or I could make a dress for $100,000, but to make a T-shirt for $8, that's much tougher. So he has this way of looking at things and approaching assignments and tasks and life ultimately that led to his success, coupled, of course, with timing, culture, and opportunities in 10,000 hours. Anyway, 2 1996 New Yorker articles gained him notoriety, and these were titled The Tipping Point and The Cool Hunt. Both would be the basis for his book, The Tipping Point, which you and I have read.
Yeah.
Outliers, published in 2008, is Gladwell's third book. It examines how a person's environment, in conjunction with their drive and motivation, affects their possibility and opportunity for success. This is the book we're discussing today. Gladwell's critics have described him as prone to oversimplification. And that's because he takes these anecdotes, these real life examples, and he applies major, definite principles to them. And that's always tricky. Gladwell's writings often deal with the unexpected implications of research in the social sciences, like sociology and psychology, and make frequent and extended use of academic work. So the work that you noted in our theme of the week discussion, he's making real life use of that. And that's his thing. Like you said, he always credits his sources, but he's doing research on his own. That's how research works. You take something that someone's already done and you expound upon it, you add to it, and you talk to people. So that's his thing. Anything else you'd like to bring out about Malcolm?
No, nothing. That's all very interesting. Thanks.
This is stepping on the end of our show. However, I want to ask you, between The Tipping Point and Outliers, which book spoke to you more?
Oh, that's interesting. Can we?
I mean, each is their own animal, but which animal did you prefer?
Oh, that is. Can we ask that at the end?
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Let's
you're
save
right.
that. I love that.
Okay. All right. Sounds good.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing the information about Malcolm. Why don't we hear your brief synopsis without spoilers before our deep dive?
Brief synopsis. Here we go. The power of genius is considered the key to success in life and business. That genius, it is thought, cannot be earned. It is divinely gifted, inexplicable. However, one writer follows the stories of the exception and arrives at one conclusion. The power of genius is nothing compared to the power of community. The latter made the Beatles the Beatles. It makes hockey players superstars and even makes Asian people great at math. Grown, but we'll explain. When you have the ability, our author concludes, what gets you to the top is not genius, it's work. What's more, the exact amount of work necessary to reach outlier status can be quantified. It's 10,000 hours or 3 hours per day, 20 hours per week for 10 years. So Alexis, what were your first thoughts of Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
Well, I enjoyed the first book that we read by Malcolm, so I was excited to jump into this book. Kari, who do you think would enjoy reading this book?
I think if you enjoy critically thinking about societal norms, then you'll enjoy this. It's not trying to change your life principles. It's just making you rethink the people who are put on pedestals. And if that's you, then it's making you because we're all put on pedestals in some area of our life. So it's making us think about, well, how did we get there? And are we really as great as we think? Spoiler alert, we ain't.
Well, Kari, are we ready to take this deep dive into Outliers filled with spoilers?
Sure, sounds good. I am going to spoil this book if you haven't read it already. However, this is going to be a discussion between Alexis and myself, and I'm only touching on a few of the anecdotes. So my point is, if you go back and read the book, you'll find a lot more there than what I'm giving you now. And let's begin. The theory: timing, culture, accumulative advantage, and practice. Timing, culture, accumulative advantage, and practice. 4 things we're going to focus on. No expert rose to the top without practice, and no amateur failed in spite of many hours of practice. The more capable individuals were always the individuals who practiced the most. Gladwell says that research has even settled on the quote unquote perfect number of hours it takes to achieve expertise, and it's 10,000. This holds true even for those select few we consider prodigies, as Alexis brought out earlier. For example, by the time Mozart composed his first masterwork, he was 21, and he'd been composing concertos for 10 years by this time. Some good, some not. And that's Mozart. To become an expert, you likely need parents who support you and encourage you. And it helps to have enough money so that you don't have to work for a living in your spare time. Only extraordinary opportunity gives a person the ability to become an expert. So that's the theory. That's what we're working with. And now we're going to apply it to real life examples to see if it holds up. Part 1, the town of Roseto, Pennsylvania. So here's the anecdote. there was this town in Pennsylvania, right? And nobody was dying and people were confused, flabbergasted. The name of the town was Roseto, and it was named after where most of the residents had originally come from in Italy. Virtually no one under 55 had died of a heart attack in this town or showed any signs of heart disease. And that was exceptional because for men over 65, the death rate from heart disease in Roseto was roughly half of that of the U.S. as a whole. So they were doing really good in the heart department. Heart disease, guys, it's still a problem. Watch your numbers. The death rate from all causes in Roseto, in fact, was 30 to 35% lower than expected compared to other regions of the U.S. So Gladwell takes the words of one sociologist named John Brunn, and that guy, Brunn, says there was no suicide, no alcoholism, no drug addiction, and very little crime. They didn't have anyone on welfare. They didn't have, any the plagues of a society that we are commonly faced with in the U.S. They didn't have it there. What they were dying from was old age. That's it. Braun also says, I remember going to Roseto for the first time and you'd see 3 generational family meals, all the bakeries, the people walking up and down the street, sitting on their porches, talking to each other. The mills where the women worked during the day while the men worked in the slate quarries. It was all magical, he says. End quote. Living a long life, the conventional wisdom at the time said, depended on who we were. That's our genes. So you live long because your grandparents live long and their grandparents live long. It depended also on the decisions we make. Are you a smoker? What do you choose to eat? How much exercise do you get? But these people in Roseto weren't like the best, the healthiest people.
Right.
They was like eating bread with their family, drinking good wine, and living a good life for a long time. And that's because no one was used to thinking about our life expectancy in the context of community. So the conclusion, Gladwell says they had to look beyond the individual. You couldn't just take someone from Roseto and say, oh, you're living to 95 because of this, and that, because then they would say, because you eat bread every day, you drink wine,
right.
You consume a lot of cheese. What people had to understand, or what the researchers had to understand, was the culture of the town. Mm-hmm. That is what was leading to the longevity of the people. They had to appreciate the idea that the values of the world we inhabit and the people we surround ourselves with have a profound effect on who we are and how long we live. This is really striking because in our society, we like to say that the individual holds the key to, anything they want in life. If you are doing well, it's because of you and no one else. If you're living long, you likely made great choices. In this case, though, specifically when it comes to life expectancy, it wasn't because of the individual's choices. It was because of the community. And it reminded me of an article that we're going to talk about in a future show that was, I'll say attacking, but it was challenging the American idea of a nuclear family. Have you read that article? Mm-mm. We've talked about it, right?
Yeah, we have a little bit.
Yeah. And nuclear family, of course, is dad, mom, and the children. They live in a house and, the children grow up, get jobs, move away. Mom and dad become empty nesters, and one by one, they die. That's the nuclear family. But that is a newish idea that helps the economy. Typically, or I should say
other
historically.
Cultures.
Yeah, well, historically, historically, and then also in cultures throughout the world, it's more common to have generations within one household. And this leads to less loneliness. It leads to healthier living. People live with purpose. Children know how to treat older people. Older people feel important because all the people in the house look to them usually for guidance, or at least speak to them, acknowledging them on a daily basis. They're cared for. So I think this goes into the idea Gladwell is presenting for why the people of Roseto were living so long. Anything you wanted to add about the town of Roseto, Pennsylvania?
No.
Okay. All right. Well, this is number 1 on our list of 4. I'm going to go through like 4 or 5. We'll see, maybe 6. So number 2, hockey players in Canada. Mm-hmm. The anecdote. Canadian hockey is a meritocracy. And that means you can't buy your way to the top. Your class or breeding is irrelevant. It's all based on your merit. Your merit gets you the success. The only thing that matters is individual talent. This is the thinking that Gladwell challenges. The conclusion. Because junior leagues, Gladwell concludes, are divided by ages, those born at the beginning of the year get more practice and coaching time. Remember, hours are the game, and their advantage, according to Gladwell, is their birth month. They get more time with the coach, they become better players. His conclusion then is that the best hockey players in Canada were born at the top of the year. They're born in January. And this gave them an advantage that, coupled with hard work, yes, made them the coach's favorite, which made them the best players, which encouraged them to practice, which got them on the best teams, which earned them victories in the sport. Naysayers, folks, are not happy with this idea. Some have taken this theory, particularly in the professional hockey world, and attacked it like a personal offense. They've named pro players, provided lists, in fact, showing many to be born later in the year. Okay. One researcher found that only 20% of the top players he studied were born early in the year. So they're like, aha,
gotcha.
Gladwell, you don't know what you're talking about our sacred sport. And I get it. But I think they're all like missing the point. This isn't about hockey. It's about the power of community and influence in the success of the successful. Maybe someone plays well that was born in September, but they lived near an ice rink that afforded them more time to practice, or maybe their parents could afford a private coach before they joined a team. The point is that true outlier status is rarely the result of an individual's natural gifts. That's it. That's it. That's the point.
There's success. Opportunities contribute to an individual's success.
And this isn't like, oh, if you're a minority and you don't get to, that's not at all what this book is talking about. It's just the idea that there's a cumulative advantage. So you start with one advantage, in this case, perhaps being born in January. You get that extra time with the coach, you get the extra practice, and then you just accumulate more advantages. Then you're better than everyone else on your team. Then that makes you want to practice more. And you know what I mean? So it's like a rolling, whatever.
Tumbleweed that picks up all the weed.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I did my own research with the only hockey players I know or have heard of. And I want to share that with you.
Oh, I love it.
Okay. Wayne Gretzky. You heard of him?
Absolutely.
He was born in Canada, January of 1961. I rest my case.
Oh, can we?
Part 3.
Can we? I mean, my goodness, I want to say he might be the only hockey player I know. Okay.
Yeah, I was proud of myself. I said, I know hockey. Wayne Gretzky. He played for the teams.
And ultimately,
on
it's
the
their
ice.
Timing. This cutoff date makes it possible for them to get in this early practice where there's people that's later on, they had to wait a whole nother year.
I wonder if you can apply this to schools, because what's the cutoff for American school system? Like September?
He did apply this to school. He talked about how it doesn't make sense to set up the school in that way. And then what you could do instead is group people so that you're with people in your common, and then you can excel through that format. So there's a September 1st cutoff. You have to be maybe 5 by September 1st or something.
Yeah, so if you're born on September 3rd, you end up being the oldest one in your class, right?
Wait,
or no,
is that the
the youngest August 30th, right? If you're born August 30th, you end up being like the oldest one in your class, and maybe that produces a stigma in you that continues through your, I don't know.
That's confusing. But he did talk about that. So I don't know ages. Okay.
Part 3, Bites Over Bros. The anecdote. So there's this guy named Bill Joy, and he's a real life person, by the way. He's a tech luminary and computer science legend. The University of Michigan opened one of the world's most advanced computer centers in 1971 when Joy was a student. And he stumbled across the computing center in his freshman year and was hooked. He had no desire to go to college for anything related to computers. I think he wanted to go for math or something else lame. So he was already like lame. But once they got the university got this computer center, he started spending more time there. He eventually enrolled in the graduate school at UC Berkeley, where he dazzled examiners with his brilliance. He went on to rewrite Unix, a popular operating system, and this led to his edits remain in effect today. So this led to coding that we still use in computer systems now. He also rewrote Java, and his legendary status grew even more. It's often said that about Joy that he succeeded in a brave new world where heritage, connections, and status didn't matter. It was all what you knew about computer programming, and that's it.
Because it was such a new era. It was such a new era.
Mm-hmm. Brand new technology. How could your breeding have anything to do with your success?
Exactly.
And that people feel like he was judged solely on his talent, and he won because he was one of the best. Full stop, period. But Gladwell's like, is that true? The conclusion. Gladwell concedes that yes, innate talent exists and it's important. You have to have some talent, right? And Joy probably had a whole lot of talent. But Gladwell argues innate talent will never become expertise without practice, lots of practice. And in the case of Bill Joy, he enrolled at Michigan. And just before he enrolled, programming was done in this tedious way with punch cards. And it wasn't so much about programming as waiting, because you would turn in these punch cards and they had to be fed by an operator into the computer, and everyone had to go one at a time. It was stupid slow, and it was nearly impossible to become an expert at that speed. But when Bill Joy entered school, the computing revolution of time sharing had been invented. Multiple people could now connect at once to one computer and give commands in a program and receive feedback. And they could do this for as long as they wanted. By happy accident, Joy found himself at one of the only places in the world where a 17-year-old could program all he wanted. Joy says that the difference between computing cards and time sharing was like the difference between playing chess by mail and speed chess. So it had finally become accessible and fun, and Joy was figuring out, like anything he wanted to do, he had the time to practice it. He neglected his coursework and spent most of every night in the lab, and by his second year at Berkeley, in Joy's own calculation, he had programmed for 10,000 hours. This theory or anecdote can also explain how the Beatles became the Beatles, according to Gladwell, who assumes that we like the Beatles, but that's fine. Alexis, can you please explain? Yeah. Can you explain how his theory translates into the success of the band?
So the Beatles were playing locally, but then they had an opportunity to play somewhere else. I can't remember where.
Germany.
In Germany. So they go over to Germany and they had to, I don't know where it was, but they had to play 8 hours a day.
Like, yeah, it was at a gentleman's club.
Oh, that
wasn't very gentlemanly.
And so usually they were only used to playing for an hour, but now they're playing 8 hours a day. Every day of the week, was it?
7 days a week.
Yeah.
So it's like this 24-hour like Las Vegas type setting. And in order to get people in the club, you had to really draw them in with your talent so that the owners could make money in their business. And so it was more about time. Mm-hmm. They could practice new techniques, try new songs. It wasn't necessarily about being the best. It was about playing the longest.
So you could play and back home, they could just play an hour and just play their greatest stuff, the best.
And maybe like open for another band that was going to play maybe similar music if they had stayed. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Like it wasn't Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in this new area, they're trying out new stuff. They're, and they're playing longer. They have an opportunity to check their weaknesses, if you will, and improve them. You're playing 8 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Insane.
No, that's insane. Mm-hmm. But they enjoyed it too. So that helped motivate them. And all of that equaled success. And they became like one of the biggest bands in the world next to, I guess, TLC. So anyway, part 4, entitled Children and Summer Vacation.
Oh, I love this one.
Me too. I should have spent more time here. I'm actually winding down. So the anecdote, some children do well in school because they're smart and focused, and others don't because they're lazy and less intelligent than the smart children. However, what about culture, a cumulative advantage and practice? This is what Gladwell's asking. The way you were raised, namely with wealthy and or less fortunate parents, also plays a role in your success.
Right.
Gladwell explains that when wealthy parents drive their children to the doctor, I loved this example because he tells you that this mom is driving her son to the doctor and she's telling him things like, Johnny, now if you have any questions, think about them ahead of time so you can ask them of the doctor. And then when they get into the doctor's office, the doctor is telling Johnny what he's going to do. And Johnny's like, hold on a second. I also have bumps on my armpits. And the doctor's like, oh, you do? Yes, I do. Okay. Do these bumps hurt? Are they itchy? No, they're just there. Okay. I'll include them in my check. And that type of back and forth with an authority gives Johnny a sense of entitlement. This is a word that has a really bad rep these days. But this is good entitlement because I know adults who don't question the doctor about things. The idea is Johnny feels entitled to speak to the doctor on a level that is closer to a peer than a subordinate. This is his opportunity to talk to the doctor about the health problems he might be having, and he has prepared. His mother has instilled that in him. I love that in this example, he also gives a child that's on the other side of the tracks that doesn't speak up so much. And you might think that it's based on race and that Johnny's a privileged white boy and the other child, a girl, is from a poor Black family. But actually, you would have to reverse that because Johnny is from a Black family and the poor child is actually white. This shows that class, not race, has perhaps more to do with our success. In contrast, the children of poor parents may feel less entitled to the same questioning. Instead, they accept what the doctor tells them straight out without surfacing any concerns or criticism. Gladwell then uses the example of a man named Chris Langan, a genius with a 195 IQ who wasn't able to succeed in college, or society would say he didn't succeed at life. Right. Now, he ended Langan's story with the fact that Langan had he had a life that was satisfying to him. He had a wife who he loved and he had like land and stuff, but you could tell that he was wasted talent. He would go to bed thinking of a problem, wake up with the solution. He would just spend hours thinking about things and he just felt like the man was out to get him.
And he also felt like he was smarter and could, than anybody around him. Like if anybody, had something for him, he knew he could answer that and really outthink people. He's really wasted talent. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. His goal was to get a PhD, but he didn't, not because he didn't have the intelligence, but because he was never taught how to carry himself, how to sell himself let me give an example. So he was learning calculus in school and he felt the teacher was purposely teaching it in a very boring, drab way. And he thought this was perhaps the teacher's method. He couldn't understand why this was happening. So it seems politely asked the teacher after class, why are you teaching it this way? And the teacher looked at him, looked down on him and said, basically everybody won't understand calculus and you one of the people that obviously don't. What the teacher didn't know is that he was exceptional at calculus. That's why he couldn't understand why it was being taught in this way. There's another example of when he was going to work to pay for school, but in order to go to work, he needed to change his classes from morning to evening. And then Dean, I think, was like, looking at your transcripts, obviously you are someone who hasn't learned the importance of hard work. Not knowing that this boy worked harder than, he's from a rural background and his life has been nothing but work. But he didn't sell himself. He was the stereotype for them of, it seems like they kind of thought he was trash.
Yeah.
Came from trash, was trash, and they weren't going to invest in him. So he dropped out of college, couldn't convince his teachers to accommodate the simple change in schedule, dropped out. And that's that. This man with 195 IQ. So the conclusion, the culture in which we're raised and the advantages we accumulate matched with success and practice lead to success, not individual merit. That's not what matters so much. It's the culture and the time we put into a skill.
And the legacy.
Oh, explain that.
It's our parents, our background, the current culture, but then our cultural heritage, where so maybe the work of our parents.
So our upbringing. And when I'm saying culture, I am lumping in upbringing, but what also matters that Alexis got to is the like culture, the current culture of society and how you're viewed in that society.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a good point.
Timing and opportunity, culture and legacy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting.
I love it. Okay. Now I want to talk a little bit about summer vacations because this is something I've heard repeatedly. Now I'm going to oversimplify Gladwell, who's the master oversimplifier, and talk about why Asian kids are good at math. Oh, just saying that makes you cringe.
Yeah.
And he says, understandably, because stereotypes are used to just decide what a whole group of people are like. However, if you test Asian children against children from around the world, Asian children typically score higher. We have to stop looking at it as in the context of what's proper socially and start looking at, well, why is this fact keep coming up?
Yeah.
And two things
I love
he
how
mentions.
He explains this. Please.
Yeah. He talks about the systematic way you care for rice paddies and how a lot of countries where rice is a chief agricultural, what am I trying to say?
Commodity.
Sure. They have to really master this. And we tend to think of all agricultural work as being hard, but that's not necessarily true. Some plants, some fields are harder to grow compared to others. And then the fields in the US, typically you have to let them lie in order for those nutrients to replenish and then you grow again. Not with rice paddies. The more you plant, the more nutrients are in that soil. So it fosters hard work and no off days, that type of living. And so this very mathematical type of agriculture. And then he also brought in the language and how, because language does affect the way we think because of the, did he say that there were like mathematical principles that some Asian language are also based on? Something like that. Do you remember?
No, I don't remember that. I was thinking more about the way the U.S. numbers counts versus how they count there.
So explain that then. Maybe I'm confusing the two.
He mentioned how in the U.S., we like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You notice how those numbers go. We do it backwards and they do it in a different manner that makes it easier to learn the numbering system and thus count.
And that's why younger children can count higher in
at an earlier
a lot of
ages.
Asian countries. Yeah.
So that was very interesting.
So you take this hardworking principle where you don't have a season off and you apply it to school. The summer vacation is a very odd system, he says, because it doesn't help anyone. If you are a poor, disadvantaged child and your parents work all day, then what are you doing summer vacation? You're playing, you're hanging out. Maybe you're in a summer tutelage program, but more than likely, most of your time is spent having fun with friends. Yeah. Good for you. What are people doing who have the resources to continue training their children? They're using that time in summer to further instill in them what they learned in school. And that's why returning from summer vacation, American children, especially poorer American children, tend to test lower than their more wealthy counterparts. Not because they're smarter or less smart, less intelligent, not because the school isn't doing their job. It's this summer vacation that's like ruining our children and making them less able to compete.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Yeah. And I've heard this before also. There should never be a period of time when children whose minds are like sponges should be told, now you ain't got to do nothing for 3 months.
Yeah.
Where do they do that at? Why is this happening?
And so he's like, kids are in school 240 some odd days over in this. I'm just going to say the Asian countries because I don't specify. I don't remember what he said.
Well, he mentioned Singapore, Japan, China. Yes.
Whereas here, we're only in school 180 days. And this made me think about the concept of year-round school. You're familiar with that?
I am.
I remember, and I don't know how successful it was, but they seemed like they was always out of school too. But it was like a week here, a week there, a week here, but I don't know. It still seemed like they were out of school. But I think
I don't hear about it anymore, so I don't know if it's still going on.
Right, and I feel like that was supposed to cover that not being out the whole summer.
Yeah, so if you, listener, know anything about year-long schooling, if it's still happening where you live, let us know.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
Because I want to know what they found with that. Yeah, so that's it. There's also a really cool anecdote about planes and pilots and how pilots from Korea were crashing planes at one time in history because of the
cultural
politeness
honor.
of their language.
The culture of honor.
Yep. So being polite in some instances cost people their lives. And I won't even say being polite. It was just a
lack of directness.
Lost in translation.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
The translation is expected to come from not the communicator, but the listener. Yeah. So
if Alexis goes, "Do you feel like lunch?" It is up to me as a listener to know that she is offering to treat me to lunch. This don't never happen. And then I'm supposed to go, "Shall I?" And then as the listener, Alexis knows that I'm agreeing.
Right.
So like stuff like that.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So let's move on to just a few questions as we close out our deep dive. Alexis, what is this book about in your opinion?
It's really, in my opinion, it's about the different ways that contribute to our individual greatness.
I love that. And individual greatness.
Yeah. So like that legacy that I was talking about, the culture that you were talking about, opportunities, and definitely opportunities, all that contributes to how great we get to become. And that's greatness is at different levels, right? So because some Bill Gates got to be great because he had that open door opportunity and the timing at which he was able to get in on this computer world and become great. I think it was that all the computer greats were all born around the same time because there was an open window of opportunity between here and here. They could be great. They could achieve, they could get that. And he had that free space in which he could be in the computer room all day. It was now a shared, what did you call it?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Yeah. That he could now do it, multiple people sharing the database and learning at the same time. So yeah, individual greatness and how all these things contribute to that so that you...
Time sharing.
Yeah, time sharing. Sorry. So you could open your mind and not feel limited about being great or better, or just because you don't have this doesn't mean you can't be great.
Mm-hmm. It also made me think of households where the responsibility is not where no one feels responsible to anyone. Maybe the dad leaves or there's no support around the mom. What you are doing is creating an environment for that child. You are hindering their advancement in life by your selfishness.
Yeah. Yep.
Because that child now has to worry more about perhaps the food that'll come into that house, the emotional or mental health of everyone in the house since they're under more pressure, and they have less time to just, go program computers.
Exactly.
Also less money, less opportunity.
You're losing opportunity.
They're not surrounded.
Yeah, definitely.
Exactly. They're not surrounded by people who are going to be the catalyst for their success. Mm-hmm. And you need all of those things to achieve your goals. And your goal may not be based on money.
Right.
Your goal might be just becoming a good teacher in order to volunteer your time to teach others.
Yeah.
It is easier to do that when you have a system around you of people who also share that goal and can encourage you to use your time in that way. Yeah. If you're worried about working, if you're worried about getting money in, if you're worried about the happiness of your mother, brothers, and sisters, it's harder to free your mind up for that. That's a real life consequence of selfishness.
Yeah. The burdens placed on the youth.
Yes. Burdens on babies. Mm-hmm. Burdens on babies. Yeah. Malcolm, write that book. Yeah. Burdens on babies.
Yeah. Yeah. Very
It ain't fair.
Mm-hmm.
Which anecdotes from this book stood out to you most? I covered 4 of them, but is there anything I left out in those 4, or was there another that stuck with you?
The culture of honor that you touched on towards the end was just like really, really surprising to me. And it really opened my eyes to other cultures and how they train people. I mean, the idea that there were back-to-back plane crashes
yeah,
based on how the communication is in that.
So we might as well talk about it just for y'all who haven't heard it. Is that okay?
Sure.
You want to do that?
I don't know if I can explain it as well as you, but
oh, you can. Okay, go ahead.
The idea is that the pilots are in the cockpit. You have what do you call them? The main pilot.
And the co-pilot and we'll say main pilot. Okay. We all know.
The main pilot and the co-pilot, and then there's somebody else in there. Well, because
no, it's just them two in air traffic control.
Okay, so then you're flying along and you see that something is not going well. So instead of saying directly to your pilot,
we don't have enough fuel to land if we don't land right now.
You say, go ahead, please.
These gauges are useful.
Okay.
These gauges that gauge how much fuel we have, they're useful.
And so what I am then supposed to understand or
pay attention to the gauges
that you want me to pay attention to those funny, gauges.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But instead I'm like, you ain't saying nothing strong with that. So you're just telling me information. You're not telling me information I need to act on immediately. There's no urgency in the tone in which you're speaking to me.
Yeah.
And so therefore I can ignore or just overlook, dismiss what you're saying to me. And if I say it 3 times, it still doesn't mean anything because
I'm not saying it with urgency. And that's a type of speech that's very blunt and to the point. Is a very Anglo-Saxon way of speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one thing he mentioned is that you have to know English, no matter where you're flying, no matter you have to know some type of aviation English at least. So the air traffic control people, because they have so many pilots from all over the world, sometimes, and just because of the job, they're often rude,
right?
Compared to other cultures in their communication. So if someone from air traffic control is talking to you like this, that might intimidate you.
Right.
And so one plane, they listened to the black box before it went down. And the co-pilot said, I think he's upset, referring to air traffic control. He is about to die, including with everyone on the plane. Yeah. And his concern is his feelings are hurt because of the way air traffic control spoke to him. And one thing Gladwell mentions, he focuses on this, what did he call it, of honor?
Culture of honor.
This culture of honor and the way they communicate and how that can't be upheld in the aviation world. But I would counter that with the idea that, well, maybe we just need to stop being so blunt. Maybe you sensitive as a co-pilot. Maybe you sensitive. Okay, I've never met you. As air traffic control, maybe knowing I've never met you, I don't know your culture, I don't know your background, I could just be a little more, do you have everything you need? You know what I mean?
That's true.
Is everything clear for you?
Good. That's true.
I could be in the position of, because I'm air traffic control, my job is to, direct traffic, but you don't see police in the street going, move it this way. Well, you do though.
So
that's bad. Don't do that.
So then, also remember he said if the pilot was serving as co-pilot and the co-pilot was actually driving the plane.
This is one of my favorite things from the book. Yep.
He said the co-pilot, which is actually the captain, is actually going to speak very directly and very clear to the co-pilot.
So what Alexis is bringing out is a policy change in a Korean airline that I think applied across, I think that's also U.S. Airlines. I can't remember. But the one with the most experience, always the co-pilot. And they made him the co-pilot instead of the pilot because it's culturally okay for him to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
In managerial teams, the one with the most experience should not be at the top. Because it is harder for other people to point out their mistakes or things they have overlooked. And it's harder for the person at the top to listen to people who do that. Yeah. So the one with the most experience should be right under whoever's leading the ship, or in this case, driving the plane, flying the plane.
And
that was brilliant.
Yeah, it was. And then the resolution for that, which improved Korean Airlines, I think it was called, is that they gave them this English, this Western education, how to speak directly so that their communication improved, and it was no longer
I don't
the
like
receiver.
that. I'm going to tell you, I don't like it. They said y'all too polite. Your language is based on what the listener receives, and it has to be more driven. The one speaking has to drive the conversation. I think there's something missing there. You don't tell people that. I don't know.
Sure, that may not have been the right way to handle that, but until they
stop the planes from going down.
Exactly. Until they figure out another way, those planes stop crashing. And so it was a necessary change at the moment. They brought in somebody from Delta, English speaker from Delta, and applied English concepts to communication. But ultimately...
By the way, have you ever communicated with a Delta? I knew that was getting on everybody's nerves. No diss to the Deltas.
But yeah, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that piece as well.
So what makes this book unique to you?
Oh, because I think I've been trying to listen to this book and also think about the tipping point. And
I'm sorry, you listened to this book?
I did.
You didn't just read the copy you stole from me?
I did listen to this
audacious
book.
On another level.
I did listen to this book because I was
oh my goodness.
I was sleeping. I had to hurry up. Yeah, so as I listened to this book, I was trying to recall the tipping point, and I couldn't really recall so much what the tipping point is about, which is why I had a hard time responding to your question, because while I remember like very specific things from the tipping point, like the learning of Sesame Street, and I can't think of that
repetition, yeah,
and other stuff, and then the learning about the AIDS and how that spread, that there was that one thing that put it over the top. I feel like this book had more personal application for me that I could use. And I think that's what I enjoyed. And as part of my conclusion, I was definitely going to say that because I was in a hurry, I listened fast, and I would like to slow down and read this book so I can get more from it.
And just sit with the information. Yeah. That makes sense. I think the tipping point is great if you're in sales or you have a business that you're trying to drive. It talks about how to use, it's almost like the 80-20 rule, how to use your efforts to get the most result. Okay. And do that by applying the law of the few, the stickiness factor, influencers. So,
okay.
And this book, anybody can use this information.
And that's what I felt like. I could really use this information in some aspect of my life to make improvements.
Yeah, it made me think of who can I support more and how.
Uh-huh.
So I love that when the focus is internal.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, great. Well, if you're ready, we'll move on to our final verdict.
Okay.
And we're back. Alexis, what did you think of Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and would you recommend this book?
It was definitely an interesting read. I like to read it slower and without a deadline. There were footnotes that I skipped over because I was trying to finish by the deadline, so I would recommend it. I mentioned it before, but I liked learning about that culture of honor, Southerners versus Northerners, communication between superiors and subordinates and flying instances, growing rights, less mistakes, mastering mathematics if you're willing to try. There were so many things. He talked about, and this might be actually from a video I read, but he said that we should be setting up institutions and structures that allow people to spend time to reach mastery, not judging them prematurely. He talked about...
Okay, let me... Go ahead.
He talked about...
Sorry. No, you got me excited. Yeah, go ahead.
This community of help. And you spoke about that briefly, but that community... it helps us to build institutions that provide opportunities in that community, small in the home where everybody is there, and then just working outward. So it was I really enjoyed this book, and I just got to read it again, just at a slower pace. I would recommend it.
You made me recall something he said about classrooms and how we send a student to the top of the class, to the front of the class to write the answer on the board. And the faster they write it, the more they're rewarded. Right. It would be better if we just sat with the student who can't get that math problem down, helped them as a community, in this case, the classroom, and stayed with them 20, 30 minutes till that problem was resolved. That's what leads to success, this kind of tenacity.
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah. So how about you? Would you recommend the book? Would you read it again? Prefer it?
Yeah, usually we talk about beach reads as being these kind of like flighty books you can hop in and out of. But this is actually a great beach read too. I first read this book on vacation, and reading something like this and then being in a relaxed atmosphere helps the information sink in. And it's just so positive. This is a book that tells you the tools are in your hands. Not that you're great. In fact, you're not great.
Right.
It's a book that fosters humility because it's telling you, you ain't no better than anybody else. You got to work hard. And when you get to where you're going, make sure you remember all the factors that contributed to you reaching your end goal. And I love that. I love the idea of thinking life doesn't happen to you. But there are actual, real, tangible factors that lead to B, that lead to C. This happened because of this. And then when things are out of your hands, let's say you're in a household where where you're under more stresses than someone else. Well, there are other factors that you can possibly create for yourself to give yourself that time to become good at whatever you're trying to be good at or whatever goal you're trying to reach. So I definitely would recommend it. This is my favorite book out of the two because like you said earlier, I do think Outliers is more for everyone. And The Tipping Point, if you're not in business or sales, I don't know if I'm really ever going to use that. So this book is more for the everyman.
Yeah. Well, that was great. Thanks for introducing me to that book. I did not steal your book. One of your other friends has it.
I bet you really believe that too. You really believe that.
So, Kari, what are we reading next week?
One Drop by Yaba Blay.
Yes. Well, thank you for listening to Lit Society. We'll look forward to meeting up with you next week, Thursday. Lit Society is brought to you by Alexis Honoria and Kari Herrera. Support the cause by leaving a 5-star review for our show on Apple Podcasts, along with a comment about why you absolutely love us, because we love you too.
We love you, Kari.
If you've enjoyed what you just heard, tell a friend about Lit Society. Visit litsocietypod.com for show notes, this month's book list, and to sign up for our amazing email newsletter.
And wake up before dawn 300 days out of the year.
And until next time, read something.